I'll share.
Hello and welcome to Socialist Think Tank. We're here with a very special guest today. Laura will be joining us a little bit later on as well. So for the time being, it is the three of us. But what we lack in numbers, we make up for in Ray Goodspeed. Hello, Ray.
Hiya, all right then. Nice to see you again.
What an absolutely amazing interview that we've just seen from you. Obviously, we've seen it a little bit earlier on, and we were preparing at the very end, so we missed the very end of the interview. But what a fantastic interview, and there were
It was
so many
great
interesting
fun. It
points
was really
coming
good
from.
fun.
Yeah, it's been good, hasn't it? So
Nothing better than
if
talking about yourself for an hour, is there? It's always great.
if you're watching online, don't forget to like and share and subscribe. I am rubbish at telling people that. I always forget to tell people that. So I'm sure I've got some brownie points, but it's normally Laura who tells me off for not saying that. And we also are here with Rochelle.
Hello.
How are you?
Who am I?
I said, how are you? We know.
Oh,
who you
how
are.
am I? I was going
I
to
know
say,
who you are.
I'm me. I'm good, thank you. I'm excited to be talking to Ray. I watched the interview and I had so many questions. It's going to be good.
Okay, well, it sounds like a really, really good time to ask one. Do you want to ask a question?
I wanted to ask about, so when you were talking about going down in the minibuses and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning and then you got there.
Yeah.
How did you figure out?
Yeah.
I know this sounds like a stupid question, but how did you figure out who was stopping where? Like, did people literally just say like, "Come on, you're coming with me," and like accept everybody with open arms? Like, it's so nice to hear.
I know they knew who were coming. We had a list of people. We sent them a list of people in a letter. Of course, email didn't exist, of course. So we sent a letter of all the people. So they knew how many people were coming and what sexes they were and and who were couples and so on. And so we were billeted out. They had a schedule of people, just like in the movie, there's people like down to stay at people. But we would normally have just arrived and gone to our houses like refugee children. We'd have just been allocated and the different families would have taken us off and taken off to their house, and that had been that. But actually, what happened? We were so late that they'd all gone to bed, or most of them had gone to bed, and so people just slept on Dan's floor, on Di's floor, and then we were billeted in the following night. Me and two mates, we went to stay with my lady, and Isla and Irene Jenkins. We stayed with them that night, so because they had more staying power. They stayed up later waiting for us, so we just went straight there and we were in a caravan. They were doing up this old sort of church building which they lived in, and they stuck us in a caravan in the front drive.
Wow.
So yeah, so we arrived so late that the people who had volunteered to take us had all gone to bed by then.
Madness. I love listening to all of it, and I also love, like, I didn't know that they would send like pretty police in to come and try and like catch us out. Like, I hadn't genuinely had no idea about that.
I mean, clearly, I don't want to give the impression that gay life. I had a really good time in the 80s. My gay social life was better in the 80s than before or since, and there were plenty of clubs and plenty of pubs. Not like gay life became impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But if they wanted, just suddenly, they chose to target a particular venue, then they would. The pretty police were mainly used in cottages, as we call them, which is public toilets, male public toilets. And there'd be people like enticing you to do something you shouldn't be doing in a toilet, and then they'd arrest you.
Wow. I can't imagine being in that situation.
No, and of course, in those days, the thing was, it wasn't the arrest, because people were often cautioned. They were rarely in prison. But of course, once you go to court for even for a hearing, your name and address is in the papers, and your life's finished.
God.
You're caught in a public toilet. You don't need to go to prison. Just the publicity will ruin your life. So.
See, that makes me think of something that's really interesting, and it was the way George Michael dealt with that in the video for Outside. George Michael, he was a bit of a socialist, wasn't he? He did quite a lot of good. Quite a lot of good in his own community. Really, really generous man, and really treated being found out about, like, when he was in a public toilet, he kind of made a bit of a joke of it, and I really liked that about your interview when you were saying, right, if someone's going to insult us, we'll take that on and we'll make it our term. So how did that come about? Was that something that was just known in the gay community in the 80s? And I say gay community, but like,
reclaiming
it's a
the word?
funny thing. Yeah.
Oh, it's just, no, we just always did. I mean, because the thing is, what you get, it's a bit like the N word in the black community, you use the word to yourself in order to disarm it, So as a joke between each other, we would often, as we're getting drunk and sort of larking around and camping it up with, oh, shut up, you puff, or something, or, get a silly tart. And we'd just say this kind of thing. And we'd tease each other of being perverts and queers and shirt lifters and Nancy boys or whatever other nonsense. And the more you make a joke of it, the more absurd it becomes. And so the words they lose their ability to hurt. Now, of course, if you then have that shouted at you by a bunch of skinners on a street corner, you don't find it funny. You leg it as fast as you can, of course. But Paul Michael, George Michael was, he was, because he had the position that, he wasn't untouchable. He could have lost his contract, could have lost his recording contract, could have lost all his sponsors, I guess. But he wasn't going to starve, was he? You know what I mean? He had the ability then to say, I don't care what you say, He wasn't working he wasn't a teacher. He wasn't going to lose his job over it. And so he was able, I'm glad he did it. He was a good lefty. He was a good lefty, not just on gay stuff. He was a good socialist, and he's really good on international anti-war stuff. He was actually, and he gave huge amounts of money to people, to various campaigns that he completely kept secret until after his death. He's one of those few people that he actually did give the money, but didn't crow about it, Where instead of all these people that you see on telly saying children in need for this and comic relief for that, George Michael just did it and stayed stum, which is, I have great respect for.
That is a massive thing to respect about him, isn't it? And there's a few people like that, but not many. And you said we didn't really find out about a lot of it until after he died, which is a bit of a tragedy, really. Well, his death was certainly a tragedy, wasn't it?
No, he gave one the fuss. Another one who kept it relatively quiet was oh God, born in USA guy. What's his name?
Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce Springsteen. Springsteen turned up at. He was playing somewhere in the north of England. He contacted the Durham miners and gave 17,000 quid.
Yeah. We basically share that check every year. They share it out through the Durham Miners Association. A couple of nice comments coming in. Leanne Powell is glad to be back with the Facebook family. She said YouTube was a bit lonely because no one was commenting over there, so she's back over. But it's great to have you, Leanne. And and we've got Tom Greenwood, who said he really enjoyed the interview as well. Please put your comments in the chat if you have any questions, because this is a genuine live Q&A. If you want to ask anyone on the panel, probably Ray, to be fair, because what would you want to learn from us? But and when Laura comes on as well, because with her celebrity, and Rochelle as well. But like me, quite dull.
I can't see any of those chats, Paul. Then I can't see those comments. Should I be able to see them?
I don't know, if you use that little link I sent you, they should be in your URL, but they're on the screen. People can see them. So so make sure that you're making some comments, telling us a little bit about what's going on, and whether you want to know anything from us. So I want to talk about some sort of modern issues at the moment with Ray, because I know that you're a CLP chair, Ray, and I don't want to trap you in any sort of way, but at the same time there's things going on in the Labour Party at the moment, and I know you had a particularly difficult meeting about bins, So.
Yeah, the wheelie bin. Oh God, don't talk about the wheelie bins. I was prepared. I don't know about resigning from the Labour Party over the witch hunt. I was prepared to resign from the Labour Party if anybody mentioned the word wheelie bin ever again. It's amazing how enraged people can get about such stuff. But yeah, no, we had a GC where a motion calling upon our conference delegate not to vote for David Evans in the to confirm him in post when conference comes along. That went through with just like one or two speakers against and one abstention, one vote against. And then all hell broke loose over the wheelie bins. You know, we were perfectly safe space talking about David Evans, but we were entirely unsafe in dealing with wheelie bins. If it had been a physical meeting, I think people would have taken their physical retribution on each other. But yeah, but there we go. No, I mean, obviously, all joking aside, I mean, the attacks from Starmer and David Evans on the left, extraordinary. I mean, you know, let's face it, I didn't vote for Starmer. It will shock you to find out. I voted for Rebecca Long-Bailey and Richard Bergen. And I knew his politics were nothing like mine. I knew his politics were way to the right of mine. I knew he is more right-wing than he said he was. I knew all of that. But the ruthlessness and the savagery and the arrogance with which they've acted towards you know, not people who've committed any kind of acts themselves, but just people who've allowed things to be discussed. It's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary situation to suspend so many of the key activists. I mean, anybody who's involved in the Labour Party knows that the chair and the secretary, by and large, a couple of others maybe in each CC, they're the people to keep the party going, particularly the secretaries, I have to say, which is almost like a full-time job. And to expel so many, to suspend so many of those is just an incredible attack on its own local structures. You know, and then now they're begging us to all go canvassing, and you think, well, you know, I probably will, but you can be forgiven for not saying, well, no, why should we canvass for you when you treated us this way? I mean, I think that would be wrong to do that, but you know, it's a shocking thing. And I just wish, you know, I mean, you know, when Corbyn was in control, everyone was saying, oh, how the left is like got a Stalinist grip. These thugs, these Trotskyists who are simultaneously Stalinists, apparently, which is a new one. These Trotskyists and Stalinists who are controlling the Labour Party, they've got an iron grip. My God, if we had been a tenth as ruthless as this new regime had been, you know, then we'd have seen some real results. I mean, I just wish, actually, that Corbyn had been half as ruthless as this group have been. And I think if ever the left is in a position again, we need to learn a few lessons and not be so nice next time.
Do you think there's like layers and layers of bureaucracy to try and stop anything changing within the Labour Party? Because that's been my experience, really. Like, you know, even the way the meetings are structured, and you know, coming from one meeting to the next, and you've got a month to decide on things, and everything's slow, and everything. You know, it's a really worrying place if you have something urgent. Because you can't deal with anything urgent. Like, you know, you can deal with it as an executive committee, but if you're a Democrat, very, very difficult. Democracy's slow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the situation is labyrinthine, and all this. I mean, we had a situation once where when we were selecting council candidates, and it was just after the Corbyn surge in membership, and the local people who control our local party, they arranged it so that the cut-off date by which you had to have joined the party before you're allowed to vote was like 6 months before. So, but it was like 18 months before the election. If you hadn't joined the party 18 months before the election was called, you couldn't vote on the council section, which actually cut out 40% of the members of my local party, because obviously it cut out most of the people who joined in the Corbyn surge, which is, I'm sure that was an accident. As you can see, and you think it's just so blatant, man. And that was when the left nominally controlled the leadership, and now of course they can do that with impunity, and they're doing all sorts. We've got an LCF in my borough, hasn't met since 2018. The local campaign forum, I guess you have them in Durham as well. The body that sort of organises the party across local ward boundaries and inside borough or county boundaries hasn't met since 2018. They just don't meet. And if they don't meet, then if they don't call the meeting, then you can't challenge them or you can't vote them down. It's an extraordinary situation. There's layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy. All these rules about you can have one rule change. If you lose your rule change, you can't discuss it again for 3 years. And it's just like the state, having the, if you get it through Commons, then you have to get it through the Lords, and then you get a new left-wing minister, but then they're actively subverted by their own civil servants. And then you get when somebody thought Corbyn could win, then you get people briefing to the press that the army wouldn't obey him, the secret services didn't trust him, and you can see the forces of the state. Had Corbyn won, it's a very interesting debate as to how the secret service and the military and the police and what somebody once called bodies of armed men would have actually responded, whether they would have actually carried out Corbyn's instructions, and you just realise that all these things. I mean, why is there a second chamber? People talk about reform in the House of Lords. Why is there a second chamber? All over the world, you've got second chambers, and in every single country, virtually, the second chamber is just to delay and to fudge and to give the establishment one last chance. Look at the Senate in America. Just another way. So the House of Representatives passed the new minimum wage law, the $15 minimum wage, and then somebody in the Senate, not even an elected official, some official appointed who works for the Senate, has said, "Oh no, it breaks the rule. The Senate can't vote for this in this bill. We can't vote for a new minimum wage." And so the minimum wage has fallen, and you think, that they'll just find. There's always some obscure medieval rule in Britain which they'll dig up to say, no, you can't do that.
It reminds me of the time when
House of Commons on its own, under PR.
Can you remember the guy, someone, I think it was a woman, was suspended for sharing a post from the Foo Fighters during Corbyn's election? One of them during the coup, they'd suspended her because it was support for another political party because she'd shared a post saying the Foo Fighters were great. And you just think, they were using any excuse whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people were just given the opportunity to vote right at the very end. Yeah, that's popular. People are saying the House of Lords need to be abolished ASAP. Fully agree with Ray. Tim is saying fully agree with Ray. The concept of second chambers get rid. And it was Paul Smith who said House of Lords needs to be abolished ASAP. Paul is a regular viewer, and I sometimes like to think he's the fashion designer who was inspired by Tour de France jerseys, with these pink colours and everything like that, Big fan of Paul Smith. Anyway, but I'm sure I'm a big fan of this Paul Smith as well. It's probably not the same one. There is a question that I know you will want to take here, Ray, and this is from Leanne Powell. She says, do you see similarities between how the gay and lesbian community was treated in the 1980s and the rhetoric being used now against trans folk?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you have to ask yourself, even on basically, why was the age of consent for when there was legalisation in England and Wales in 1967, why was the age of consent set at 21 as opposed to 16 for straights? That was a question really of, young people, they just don't know. They don't know their own mind. It's all just a phase. Listen, I was told, when I sneaked to look in my encyclopedia at home about homosexuality, wondering what the hell homosexuality was and whether it applied to me, and it said it was a mental illness that would eventually, it sometimes manifested itself in teenage years, but luckily, thank God, it was only a phase sometimes, And I thought, thank God, this nightmare is not permanent. I'm going to grow out of this. I'll just hang on and I'll start fancying women again. And and I lost a lot of teenage romances. I resent it to this day. I lost a lot of that. I lost a lot of that possibility of that sort of that sort of sweet little sort of teeny romances that I never had a chance to have, because constantly gaslighting gay young people, telling they don't know who they fancy, and now they're saying you don't know that you're trans, you don't know you're trans. Now, of course, this is the other nonsense. I can't imagine anybody. Trans people have got more of an interest in people not transitioning by a mistake than anybody, because the very worst thing for the trans community would be for loads of people to transition and then detransition. That'd be a terrible stick that could be used to beat us all with, you know, or beat the trans community with, and the LGBT community more generally. So of course we all want people to be sure, and we want proper counselling, and we want a health service. All of that kind of counselling would be easier if you didn't have to wait 2 years for your first appointment. I mean, you get a situation where you go to your doctor and the doctor says there's a need to refer you to a gender clinic. You wait 2 years to be seen, just to have your first appointment. And when you get to your first appointment, do you know what happens then? The next appointment is, oh, yeah, we'll see you again. We have a half hour now. We'll see you again in another 2 years. So but yet the transphobes in and out of the Labour movement and in the so-called feminist movement and all, they'll have you believe that there's some sort of national plot to trans people up. Let's trans him. You know, that girl has climbed a tree. She needs to be transed. You know, that boy dared to play with his sister's Little Mermaid doll. We insist now that let's get him and trans him quickly. And you think, hang on a minute, in whose interest is it? I mean, at least in my day, they said that gay people were, you know, we were recruiting other gays because we wanted to shag them. But that doesn't apply. Nobody gains from making other people trans. You know, people are trans because they're trans. And I think the idea that there is some kind of plot, what's the motive we're supposed to have for forcing people to be trans against their will? I just never understood what the point of this is. Who's behind this plot?
Have you seen what they say in America?
Idiots on Facebook saying that the lesbians are being stolen and they're being forced by society into becoming trans men, as if trans men somehow have an easier time than lesbians. Are you joking? Have you met any trans men? Have you seen what shit they go through? So no, I mean, very similar. I mean, you don't know, you're sick, you're part of a plot. Then they go, oh, let's protect the children. It's always the children, they want to protect you know. So it's Section 28, it's protect the poor. Yes, you can be trans if you want, but let's protect the poor children. Think of the children, God help us. Think of the poor children, Mary, you know. And it's the same old nonsense. And there's all the philosophical stuff about, what is a woman and the nature of women, and really, we can get into that later on if you like. That's a complex discussion to have, but I just think it's you've got. I mean, the greatest example, and I know you're getting a longer answer to a short question. Sorry, man, but you had a situation. Good. There was this woman, Abigail Shriver, who produced this book, and it basically about what it was called rapid onset gender dysphoria. And the idea is, but these people are suddenly becoming trans. We never knew it before. They're suddenly becoming trans. They must be teaching it to each other. They must be getting it off the internet. Well, I suddenly became trans when I was 20. I suddenly became gay when I was 22. I had girlfriends before that. Was that rapid onset homosexuality? It hasn't dawned on these people that people hide their sexuality. They hide their dysphoria and their gender having a gender different from that assigned at birth. And I think it's the idea that just because you've come out, because you come out now, you've suddenly thought about it like yesterday. Instead of, in fact, people have gone through years of torment, but hoping it isn't true, trying to cure themselves in some bizarre way. Hoping and praying, if you're religious, praying, desperately trying to think of something else when you're, whatever. I can't talk about that, but just desperately trying to convince yourself that this nightmare cannot be true. So yeah, it's ridiculous. Of course people are sure, and I think the way that the trans community have been demonized by sections of the left is a scandal. But I must say, and I'll finish on this, I was not great on this issue myself. 2 years ago, I really was not great on this issue myself. I wasn't terrible on the issue, but I wasn't great. And I've had to really think this situation through. And I've done it by actually talking to and listening to trans people. Here's a surprise. Because the book I just referred to, they managed to write this book without talking and it was based on research that didn't talk to a single trans youth. They only spoke to parents who volunteered to be interviewed from an anti-trans mum's website. And that's where this evidence of rapid onset gender dysphoria came from, you know. And you think, well, try talking to trans people, see what they think, you know. Oh, trans people deny biological sex. Well, really? I've never met a single trans person who denies biological sex. I can't think of anybody in the world who knows more about the differences between biological sexes than trans people. If you think about it, you know, they obsess and they think about these differences more than anybody else on the planet. So yeah, sorry, I went off on one there. But yeah, it's those people in the LGB, especially the LGB people who like to say they're anti-trans, gay, and lesbian people. They can be reserved a special place in hell for me. Because how you can go through what we went through in the 70s and 80s, and now not join the dots and make the obvious kind of solidarity now, I think is scandalous, and they need their asses kicked, to be honest. Sorry,
Rochelle,
there's a longer answer than you.
It's really good to hear this, Ray, because like this is what we're talking about, isn't it? It's solidarity with people, and it's believing people. And what if people weren't believed for being gay, like you said earlier on, like was that sudden onset gayness when you became 22, you know? And it's a really strong, powerful answer, that one. Rochelle, we were speaking a little bit about this earlier on, weren't we? And we were saying, you know, both of us are teachers, and both of us have met trans youths in our schools because, you know, because they exist. You know, it's simply right. They exist. What are your thoughts on this? You know, is it easy for children? Is it just like a potential fad? Is it really, really cool for them to do this? And do they just do it for some sort of reason like that? You know, is that even a valid argument in the slightest?
You know what? I think it's like anything. If the best thing you can do is just give them a choice. And even if, you know, like, even if it is a fad, I don't think it is. I don't think anything like that is. But if it is, then they have the absolute right to go down that route. And then if they change their mind, they absolutely have the right to change their mind. But what you can't do is tell them that they don't have the choice to do anything that they want to do. Like, it's their body, their feelings. You can question them and say and help them and ask questions to maybe open up what they feel, but you shouldn't be telling them things. Like, no, I think that's absolutely horrendous. But I do think that kids nowadays, young people, have it a little bit easier from the 80s, you know, 70s, 80s, 90s. Even now, I think a lot of their friends are more open to it, and it's not, you know, it's not something that they're not willing to talk about. Like, they are willing to talk about, and they're willing to openly talk about it. But I think that's only because of everything that, you know, everything that he's talking about. They've only got an easier time ish because of everything that happened back then. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a follow through, but at the same time, I don't have a clue. Like, I only go off what people tell us, or like if kids want to talk about it, you know. I think it's totally up to them, and if they want to try it, let them. Like what you say, that what doesn't affect you, doesn't affect us at all. Just let them try.
I remember speaking to my mum about this, and my mum said, she says, like, we spoke about the trans people for a little while, and at one point she did just say, I just do feel so, I find it so confusing, but, you know, and welcome to Laura, by the way, you are now on, Laura is now on, so my mum did say to me, I find it so confusing. I says, well, imagine how confusing it would be to be born in the wrong body, to have a body that doesn't match up with the gender you identify with. That's way more confusing for that person than it ever would be for the idea that trans people exist. My mum's lovely, by the way. She was trying to be understanding, but she just said, found it confusing. And yeah, fair enough. It is a little bit confusing for people, but far more confusing for the people who are going through that transition and going through that kind of that challenge.
Of course, I mean, by the time they tell their loved ones, there's a song by a guy called Noah Adams. He says, he said he's lying to everybody you love most. When you feel you're as obvious as Pinocchio, and Pinocchio is obviously, he wants to be a real boy kind of thing. And it's, of course, they think about this for years and years and years before they tell anybody. And then when they tell somebody, they're accused of having rapid onset, all of a sudden, you've suddenly decided you suddenly decided it's trans because it's trendy. Well, no, look, I'm sure that some people out there in universities and so on and so forth, some communities, I'm sure people are they're testing out their own feelings. There's, in my life, I've known plenty of people who say they're bisexual, but or they say they're gay, but it turns out that they're mostly not, and they go on, and that was something they did. That people can experiment with their feelings. That's what being a teenager is all about, But when people often ask me when I do question and answers on LGSM, younger people, very young people, say, "Well, there are no trans people in LGSM. What were the trans people doing?" I'm saying, "Well, there wasn't any really." People forget how new this issue is for the labour movement, and that's why there's so much confusion and ignorance about it, because it's new. Because the possibilities of transitioning were much less then. The community as such didn't exist. It was regarded almost uniquely as a, if you like, a kind of a personal medical problem, that you had to somehow get through in shameful secrecy. It wasn't regarded as a community. It wasn't a political, an area of political campaigning. I did know one trans woman, I'm very pleased to say, somebody called Rachel Webb, who's worth researching, actually. Rachel, whose actual position on trans rights, because it was so long ago in the 80s, I don't agree with, actually. I don't think she worked out her position on trans rights that well, and who knows. But anyway, so I'd probably disagree with, but nevertheless, she was a trans woman who was a disqualified Lambeth councillor. She got elected to Lambeth Council. When, I don't know if you know the history, when the Lambeth Council set an illegal budget in the 80s to break the Tories' rules on budgets. And so they, along with Liverpool Council, and they're all united in this campaign to set an illegal budget and to not accept the Tory cuts. Well, the original councillors were all disqualified, and they got another 60 people to stand, and Rachel was one of those. And she won her seat, and that was fine. And then she was outed. There was a massive centre page spread in the News of the World, outing her as a trans woman. And she went through hell being doorstepped. You can imagine what that did to her life. But then the next election came along, and she won with a bigger majority. So she was the first person to win a seat, I think, on the council back in the late 80s as an explicitly, openly trans woman. And she won anyway as a Labour councillor because she fought for people. She fought for council tenants and for council services. And that's the point. Yes, she's trans, but she's fighting for a community, and that's the point. It's solidarity.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring in, because I'm very well aware that none of us on this call are trans ourselves. I would say that we are probably. I would say it's fair to describe us as trans allies, but we don't know what it's like to live that life. But someone who has got involved with this, and this is Mia, and she has said, lots of people used to think my being trans was a phase. One person said I should wait because there might be a cure. Someone said I shouldn't go to a wedding because having a transsexual at their wedding might feel like it would be like it would for me having someone from the BNP at mine. When I spoke online about how being forced to present as male as a child and a young adult made me suicidal, I was accused of shutting down the debate. And I love hearing these insights from Mia, and I think personally I've learned a lot from learning about Mia's experiences and things, and it's strengthened my my personal feelings on this issue. Laura, what do you feel about this? It's the first time you've spoken tonight, so it's lovely to have you on. Thank you Thank you for doing what you do. We don't live in a sexist household. I normally put the children to bed.
Which is why it takes me so long.
So that it's more good that I have to do the directing, which I'm sort of doing tonight. So What do you think,
Don't
Laura?
worry, you're not a misogynist. We're a team. It's fine.
Well,
I'll
it's
second that.
questionable. Yeah, well, thanks.
Yeah, according to some people. Let's not start that, shall we? Yeah, this whole thing for me is really, really, really just upsetting. Because why I don't understand why politicians and especially right wingers are just so intent on having a say on other people's bodies. You know, and I mentioned this in a comment actually during Ray's interview, which was incredible, by the way. Ray, I've seen it 4 times now, and I love it every time. But the sort of, we've come a long way. Obviously, it's not illegal to be gay anymore. But like Ray said, that we're not done. That's not anywhere near done. You know, we are making strides, but still we've got the American government deciding that it's against the law to have an abortion. Even if you've been raped as a young girl, if you get rid of that child, you go to prison. You know, we are losing any sense of autonomy over our own bodies. And I say losing. What I mean is we've never gained it. We've never gained it. There's always someone who's got an opinion on someone else's experience, having never lived it. And I think that is the most depressing part of this. Like you say, I class myself as a trans ally, but I don't understand what a trans person goes through, and I hold my hands up about that. I've never had to go through it. I can't imagine how it must feel to wake up in the wrong body every single day and to have to try and live a life where people tell you how you actually feels wrong. And the whole, like we hinted earlier, the whole are trans women debate, that shouldn't even be a debate. Yes, there are separate issues around safeguarding in, you know, one of the big ones is refuges, safe spaces for women. That those safeguards are already there. This isn't an issue. If there's a woman there who struggles with anyone who looks like a man, who presents as a man, then you just put them somewhere where that person isn't. But you've got to have a safe space for trans women who haven't transitioned yet, because I'm damn sure they go through a hell of a lot of abuse and struggle, and they need safe spaces just as much as anybody else is. I just feel like the whole world needs just some bloody empathy. Really, they really just need to put themselves in the shoes of other people and imagine if that was you, would you want to be treated like this? No. Let people be who they think they want to be. You know, yes, if somebody murders somebody, that's not good. That makes them a bad person. But just wanting to be who they feel they are, it doesn't make someone a bad person. Of course it doesn't. And it shouldn't be illegal. It shouldn't be questioned. And it shouldn't be up to governments to decide how and when those people transition or present or what they look like or how they behave. It's up to them. It should be, in my eyes anyway. I'm really passionate about it, but I'm well aware that I don't know enough of the legalities. I've never lived it. I just hate other people having a say on how other people live their lives. It really bothers us.
There's a daily maleization of this though as well, because I find a lot of people, and this works really well with when kids say really inappropriate things, and kids will say inappropriate things. That's fine. That's how they learn. We don't not forgive people for making mistakes, and you know, how else are you supposed to learn? And that goes for adults and kids alike. But a lot of them will say, oh well, you know, if it's a trans woman, they'll say, well, has he got a knob? And they'll say something like that, and a really unfair thing. And I'll just say something along the lines of that is a really weird thing to ask. Do you normally care about what's in anyone else's pants? Is that what you're going around thinking about on a day-to-day basis? You know, is that, does that matter? You know, the only people that should interest are the people who are interested in those people physically, and that's it. You know, and for intimate partners and things like that, you shouldn't be interested in what is going on with one another's genitalia, and that does work with kids. Kids will see that and say, actually, yeah, it is a bit pervy of me, isn't it? It is a bit weird for me to ask that question, you know, because it doesn't matter what's going on there. Have you heard those questions?
Interestingly, right, you're totally right, because it works the same way, you know, like with graffiti. You know, like if you're looking through like an old textbook and then all of a sudden you come across like a page with loads of knobs on, like, and you're like trying to find out who the culprit is. I always say, like, why have you not drawn loads of like vaginas? Like, what, like, why is it always knobs? What's the obsession? And then straight away they're like, oh.
So they've never seen one, probably.
Yeah, well, and then I'm like, well, why are you just drawing this everywhere? And then like they'll think about it, and then straight away they're like, oh, and I'm like, well, don't go and Google them now, like just to like draw them, and then like later on, I'll look and I'll say like, oh, have you not drawn any nice pictures? And they're like, no, miss, like really put out that I've taken the mic, but really they understand that there shouldn't really be, like it's totally true.
I often find if I were a teacher, I'd be tempted to say to like a 12-year-old boy, say, okay, supposing that you wake up, that you go to bed tonight and you wake up and your parents have decided that you're a girl and they send you to school and they've given you drugs, you're going to grow breasts, and they send you to school in a frock and tights and with ribbons in your hair. How would you feel? How out of place and uncomfortable would you feel? And this applies, by the way, to loads of kind of earnest elderly Marxists who talked about we should abolish gender. No, we shouldn't give in to the trans lobby. We should just abolish gender. Like these people who probably don't know how to clean their own toilet or probably don't look after their own kids and they've never been seen dead in a frock, even on Halloween, So imagine if that you had to, if you're a boy, if you had to dress as a girl, and how uncomfortable that would make you feel. And then you think, well, okay, trans people just know that they're not. They know they're not what they're assigned. A trans lass, she knows she's a girl, but she's forced to like dress as a boy, and that must feel completely odd. And imagine like a trans man, they're like growing breasts and stuff, and they think, oh God, no, everyone's going to see them. They're going to know. They're going to suddenly know that I'm a girl, and that's the last thing. I'm not a girl, but how can I hide these breasts? And that kind of terror, and get it across that way. Imagine what if you went to another country and all of a sudden overnight, like that film Big, when you wake up and you're someone else. Imagine waking up in a society where somebody's decided that you have to dress as a girl now, and how bad that would feel if you didn't identify with that. Sorry.
Man, many issues with the film Big. Watching it as an adult, it was really good as a child, and now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this film Big. It's got issues, but
they sailed completely over my head. I'm sorry, I'm glad to say.
Well, it's more the fact that there's a child who's dating an adult woman and he's bouncing on bunk beds and things like that. It makes me feel quite uncomfortable.
Fair enough.
But loads of really, really good comments coming in. Paul Smith, who isn't the Paul Smith, otherwise he would donate to left social media everywhere. You can donate to us, by the way, and you can be a member of Socialist Think Tank. See, I'm getting better, aren't I? Even though I feel absolutely embarrassed.
I can tell you feel crap about it.
Yeah. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, everyone. And then but you can become a member of Socialist Think Tank for free. You don't have to pay us anything at all. You can just become a member on our website. So please do visit our website and do that and get involved. We have forums on there where you can speak freely about socialist issues and get involved in the debate there. But Paul Smith was saying the Workers' Party of Great Britain are meant to be socialist, but they are anti-trans. There's a lot of anti-trans people.
Parties. Is this the George Galloway one?
George Galloway? I don't know. Maybe Paul will tell us.
Excessively trans. He's outrageously anti-trans.
I just don't think you can be socialist and anti-trans. I don't think you can be anti any human.
Yeah.
And be a socialist.
Well, yeah, I think
the anti-racist.
I think it's not as simple as that.
Anti-Nazi.
We need to sell that. We need to sell. See, the trouble is, I think people who are used to gay rights being accepted have just kind of assumed that trans rights would be accepted as well. And they got a right to assume that, but it isn't actually true because the trans thing is so new, and that people only started really to accept gay people in the party, in the unions, once they knew one. You started to know more and more and more of us. More of us came out. But very, very, very few people have ever met a trans person in their life. And they just don't get it. They just don't understand it. It's beyond them. And I think there's a real job of education to be done there. And the Labour campaign for trans rights does a lot of good work on this. It's a good link. where they instead of howling and trying to like expel people all the time, they're trying to educate and convert. Now, of course, should some people be expelled? Yes, there are people out there who are just hateful and they need expelling. But also a lot of people just, honestly, they don't know the first thing about it, and they're likely to believe any nonsense they're told, and they just need proper education, and they need to meet and listen to trans people. Yep. Real actual trans people who don't spend their life plotting to take over the world, but just actually want to pee. They just want to go shopping and have a piss. You know, that's what they want to do, and they just want to get on with their life.
Yeah, there's the argument, isn't there? I was going to bring this up earlier on when you were saying what is the reason for people doing this. I watched a documentary and it was about the woman who was she was in the Marines and transitioned, and it was a few years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was, but she went around America interviewing people about why they were anti-trans. And it was the whole like, well, you know, they're going to go into, I won't do the accent, but it was a deep South accent. And they're going to go in and they're going to transition so that they can go into women's bathrooms and rape them. And she said, well, why would anyone do that? Why would anyone do this and you know, and go through hormone therapy and you know, have procedures done on them? Why would they do that in order to rape women? It was like, because that's what I would do. Really? Yeah. Is that really? And that's it. And these are the opinions that we're valuing above others. That the people are going to say, oh, actually, what I'll do is I'll have 2 years where I'll live as a woman, and then I'll take some hormones, and then I'll do this all as an evil scheme to go and rape someone in a bathroom, when really what you could have done is just, if you're a rapist, just rape them anyway.
Just battered down the bathroom door and gone in and done it. Just go into the bathroom. Yeah. Women are very often alone in bathrooms. They could just easily, if you were determined to do that, you'd just do it. I mean, the argument goes, oh well, some men aren't actually, they don't have surgery, they don't have hormones. But even trans people without any kind of medical intervention, they still have to like declare themselves to live as women all their life. That's a hell of a thing to do, just to break into a bathroom, which you could batter the door down anyway and rape anybody, or you know, either in the bathroom or in the car park on the way home. You know, why on earth would people go through the trouble? As if you know, you've got a rapist who knows that it's a really serious offence, he'll go to prison. But a symbol on the door, oh no, sorry, I've seen the symbol. It's like a vampire with a holy cross. You know, oh, sorry, there's a symbol on the door. I can't go in.
I haven't been invited in. I'm not wearing a skirt.
I have to be invited in by evil trans lobbyists before I can go in. If a man wants to rape somebody, he'll just batter the door down and do it anyway. You know, this is all such nonsense and scaremongering, and there's almost zilch evidence anywhere in the world that this has actually happened. What there is evidence, by the way, is of trans women being forced to use the gents, or being battered in the gents.
Yeah.
By the way, what about trans men? Trans men are always forgotten about it.
Mm-hmm.
There are trans men there with like full beards and pecs and abs. There are trans men who win like male fitness bodybuilding awards. They're on the front page of Men's Health magazines, you know? What, do they go to the ladies then? And of course, if they have to go to the ladies, then that absolutely then allows any man to go. Because if a trans man with a six pack and biceps and tattoos and a beard has to go into the ladies, well then that's carte blanche for any man then to go into the ladies, surely. So they're defeated by their own argument. And of course, absolutely. What's so annoying is that trans women have been using the ladies forever. When I was on Switchboard I was on Gay Switchboard. It didn't come out in my little story, but I was a volunteer for Gay Switchboard for 3 years, from 1985 to 1988, in the middle of the AIDS, in the eye of the storm of the AIDS crisis. But we used to get calls from people in those days we called transsexuals or transvestites, old-fashioned language. And we used to give advice as to where they could go to try clothes on, where they could buy clothes without being made to feel embarrassed. And Marks and Spencer's have allowed trans men to try on clothes in the ladies' change room since the 80s. This is not new. and it's not important, and it's nonsense, and they're all bloody lockable cubicles in any case. It's just all such nonsense. And I love the idea that, in a swimming bath you could have men in a swimming bath. I cannot think of anything in the world a trans person would less rather do than go naked in a swimming pool changing room. I just cannot imagine how appalling and triggering of dysphoria that would be. What nonsense. Yeah, Mia's just exactly said that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, about single-sex spaces. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd
And
be
there's been some really
interested to-
strong comments on this from a lot of people, actually.
Can I just jump in there for a second? I want to say something that we haven't really talked about a lot, and it might be a complete pipe dream and absolutely not the right thing to do. But I'm wondering about gender conformity and how a woman is one thing and a man is another, and that's the way it is. Will we ever get to a point where people can just be people and we don't have to use labels? Because obviously there's men's and women's changing rooms, and I imagine the reason for that is so that, you know, women's sensibilities aren't injured if we ever saw a penis, God forbid, or that men who are all rampant racists might attack some women. So it just feels to me like, are we not getting to the point where we can start having a conversation about why these rules are there anyway? And could we just be people? And then that, I can only imagine, would help trans people to allow themselves to just be whoever they want to be. And you don't need to be strictly male or strictly female, or, you know, these really binary ideas of what a man and a woman should be. I don't know, it got me thinking earlier on when I was watching this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's in the short term, that's very difficult to do because there are issues. I mean, you know, women would, you know, people on one hand, people don't want to be fancied. They don't want to be fancied when they don't want to be ogled in a sexual way while they're changing, I guess. But you see, this was also used to keep gay men out of the army because they thought, well, gay men can't join the army because they'll be living cheek by jowl, so to speak, with other squaddies in kind of in personal, sharing showers, sharing barracks, and they'll be ogling, you know. There was a thing to keep gay men out of the Navy and submarines and so on because they'll be ogling their workmates. But you think, well, they don't know, do they? You know, I mean, and if they do, you know, and if, you know, women could be ogled by lesbians, I suppose, in toilets. But I suppose, no, clearly given the prevalence of male violence and sexual violence, I can obviously see why those kind of separate facilities are needed. But it does smash the whole thing. I mean, it's very interesting how the feminist side of the transphobe argument, they often say that, trans people, they kind of reinforce gender stereotypes. But of course they don't. I know trans men who are super butch, male models, bodybuilders, you know, bearded, tattooed, you know, whatever. I also know trans men who are gay and completely daffy, completely flamboyant and flappy hands. And, you know, that the idea is I know, you know, you can be a trans woman and a tomboy, or a trans woman and a fashion victim, you know. Both those things are possible. But how you act is not the same thing as how you think you are. You can still see yourself as a male or female. Yeah, there are sort of effeminate and masculine cis men, and there are effeminate and masculine trans men. You see, it doesn't matter. How you see yourself is simply not the same as how you present, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of what I'm getting at.
The only thing is, though, that if you're a trans woman, especially, and if you don't kind of glam up and look feminine, people think you're just playing at it. They think you're not really trans, and you get blamed for not being really trans. Then if you do it, you're attacked for being girly and for reinforcing gender stereotypes. You can't win. They got you either way.
Yeah, I have heard someone. We were at Pride. This was like, I was at uni in Norwich, and then we went to Pride. Got the train across to London, and I remember hearing like people walking past the big display, and we walked past, were like, "You're a really shit tranny, you," and I was like, "What? Like, what do you mean?" And it is this thing of like, you either are male, female, male transitioning, woman transitioning, you know, like in school, we teach the kids now about like gender fluidness, about accepting other people, about talking about your feelings, about like, I don't know. I do think that Laura has a point, and I do think that challenging the behavior, first of all, is like a massive thing. So teaching, you know, the kids that you shouldn't oogle somebody, it doesn't matter who they are, you know, or what they identify as or whatever. And it's those types of behaviors that you have to sort of counteract right really early on, you know, like wolf whistling, all that kind of stuff. It needs to be dealt with really early on in schools. Parents should be having these types of conversations with their kids, you know. And I do think it's not about like education, you know, like you will get a certificate saying that you are, I don't know, but it is about like having open conversations and making sure that people understand that there are other people in the world who feel the way that they do and why they feel the way that they do, and how you could help them, you know, out, or like even, you know, how to ask questions, because people, like, kids are nosy, aren't they? They just want to know, and they're so good at asking questions. And what we're not good at as adults is like asking genuine questions, because we're scared that someone's going to shut us down. Like, we've talked about this loads. Like, just people need to be able to ask those questions, but also be taught that sometimes their behavior is out of order and how to deal with maybe situations better. I think that's a big blocker.
I think the Labour movement. Sorry, Laura.
No, I was just going to say, just on that, Rochelle, I think it'd be lovely if we could, but it seems like we've got centuries of ideology to undo, essentially. You know, I think a really simple example is that I have to shop in the boys section for Scarlett, our daughter, because she really likes dinosaurs. But apparently they don't make dinosaur things in girls sections because they're not for girls. And it's like really top level stuff. That's really easy. But then we go back to the things like the rape culture. Or, you know, I see so many people saying you shouldn't wear this, you shouldn't drink too much, you shouldn't do this, dress a certain way. And I saw this meme the other day that I thought just hit the nail on the head. By telling me not to wear this skirt, you are basically telling me to tell the guy to rape the other person.
Oh yeah.
And it's just about trying to change the culture, the patriarchy, which I've been a long advocate for smashing it. I don't say that from a yay women point of view. I say that because the patriarchy and the ideology around that damages men as much as anybody else. You know, it strips away a lot of their personality and who they want to be. It's you have to be this type, you have to be strong, and you can't cry, and you can't do this and the other. And I think if we can, from a very early age, like you say, Rochelle, start to just minimize those stereotypes, then we can grow up in a more understanding world. Yeah, maybe we will never ever get to a point where gender is not a thing. And you know, I'm part of the women's banner group. I'm a proud woman. I think women are mint, but I don't think they're better than anybody else, and it'd be lovely if everybody could just be equal and be nice and it not matter, I think is what I'm getting at.
I think one of the things you were getting at as well was the...
When I was a kid at school, the test was that the lads would ask another lad to look at his fingernails. And you think, what? So if you went like that, you were queer. And if you went like that, you were all right, you know? So if you can do it, ask a bloke to look at his fingernails and see which way he does it. You know, that apparently was the cast iron test for whether you're a queer or not.
Oh, whether you bent them back. I've heard that.
So if you bend them back, it's like, do you hold a cigarette like that, or do you hold a cigarette like that?
Oh God!
See, one of the things that I really learned about this at university. So I did psychology when I was there, and I think he was called Mark Moss, did some research into the length of your finger, so like the length of your fingers, and say this one, your ring finger, that ring finger, apparently if you're statistically more likely to be gay if your ring finger is longer than your index finger. That's what he found, but it was found because you have more testosterone in the womb, that happens, and therefore most people who are like that how fingers like mine, because that means I'm statistically more likely to be gay, which doesn't mean that you necessarily are. It just means like it's a statistic thing, and it's like, well, physical differences and stuff like that. Such a weird thing to look into, and I didn't know whether it was helpful or harmful. But the outcome was that gay people were going to be better at spatial awareness questions, and it's like. Because like there was this link, and it's like, what? I don't know. I don't know whether that kind of thing's helpful and looking for physical differences and it just, can we not just be whatever we want to be?
I have to say, I'm not a great fan of looking for biological. There is a whole thing that the trans community are trying to abolish physical sex, and they're not. They're painfully aware of the differences between somebody who's a male and people. They are more aware than anybody else in the entire world of those differences because they spend their entire life grappling with them. Yeah. I know there are some trans people who say they were born, they've got a woman's brain and a man's body. There's very little or contradictory evidence of this, and we'll have to wait and see what the science comes up with later on. I don't believe I was born gay or I've got a gay brain either. The testosterone thing with the fingers, it's a testosterone marker, but I've not seen that it's linked explicitly, convincingly to being gay or not. It's just a testosterone marker. It means if you've got more
one study,
you'll be faster at running and weightlifting if you've got more testosterone. That's what it is. I'm not. I'm clearly. I prove
it's apparently it's womb testosterone.
Yeah,
so
that's
not
right.
How much testosterone you have as an adult; it's how much testosterone
it's right.
you had while you're in the womb.
You're born more athletic if you've got more testosterone, apparently. But I don't believe there are physiological differences between gay men and straight men. I think but the difference is and I understand why trans people and gay people want to believe that, because it kind of says, don't be mean to me because it's not my fault. That's what they want to believe, because it's very hard to get from. I was born that way is safe because it's, my mum always wanted to believe that I was born this way because it let her off the hook of blame. It wasn't her fault. She didn't make any mistakes raising me. I was just born queer, and that was, God intended me this way. Blah blah blah. But if you're not born that way, then is it just a choice? Is it something you can change? Well, no, that's not true either. It's in between those two things. It's a deep-seated psychological need set down in very early life. But it's neither a choice nor is it innate. That's why it's difficult to get across to people, because they think, well, if you're not born that way, then you must best be choosing. Anyone can just choose to be gay or choose to be trans. Well, that's obviously not true either, And it's that in between one which is sometimes hard to explain. And so it's easier to rely on, I was born this way. I was born gay. I've been gay for as long as I can remember. Whatever. It's hard.
But that's it.
It's like thing for me on that. Sorry, Rochelle.
Sorry, no, you go.
I think I was going to basically say the exact same thing. It's really sad that you have to explain this, because I don't have to tell people why I chose to be straight.
Yeah, exactly.
And also letting people off the hook and people going, it wasn't my fault, sort of suggests that there's something wrong with you. And there's not. It's just who you are. I didn't I fancy Paul. Many people might think he's horrible. They'd be wrong. But, I didn't necessarily choose that. It just
you've got very good taste, Laura. You're embarrassing now.
Yep.
Paul, are you muted?
Yeah, sorry. No. Oh, right. I am. What I was saying is that people, I think what Laura was talking about was the non-binary people earlier on, and that the idea that gender is a spectrum. So some men are a little bit more on the feminine side of the spectrum, and some men are very manly, and some women are on the very womanly side of the spectrum, and some are more manly, and it's okay to be kind of in the middle. And I think that's what, like, being forced into one role or the other can be quite damaging in the idea of a binary world. You know, where do those non-binary people fit in society? And there are very few people who are comfortable, and I really do admire them for being comfortable enough just to say, yeah, I'm non-binary. You know, I'm somewhere in between. And I think that's probably, was that what you were getting at earlier on, Laura, with the idea of trying to force people to?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I think people should be able to celebrate being a woman, or celebrate being a man, or celebrate being non-binary or whatever. But I think I live in this really utopian world where I just think, wouldn't it be nice if we were all just people? I think that is severely unlikely, given that our whole society is based on thousands and thousands of years of oppression and rules from people who are much more important than us. But it would be lovely if we could all just be people. But yeah, I think having to fit into a certain pigeonhole is really problematic and causes so much damage to people. So yeah, I mean, you're right in what you say. There's such a spectrum, and I think there needs to be a lot of education about that and a lot more understanding about that. I count myself so lucky because I was born white, British, heterosexual. I've got it easy. All I am is working class. That's my problem, you know.
That's really not that easy.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. And so I think that but I care, and I try and educate myself. I don't know enough. I'll not live that experience. Well, I might, you know, I'm 40 now. Things could still change. But it's just really difficult to see people being treated poorly because of something that they haven't just gone, tell you what'll be good for a laugh. I might do this now. I might be trans now, or I might be gay now. That's not what it is. It's just who they are as people. And I really struggle that people have to feel so bad to be pigeonholed and to have to choose one way or another. You've let me ramble far too long, Paul. This is not good.
I'm not chairing this session. I'm facilitating discussion. So
you should not have shut me up by now.
I was saying just to a
never shut
friend.
you up.
I was saying to a friend, well, the daughter of a friend, and she's my friend too, just this afternoon, that sometimes when you're campaigning for your rights, you have to set up kind of titles. You have to set up communities, and you can identify as this, or this. You know, LGBT, da 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 da. But actually, as the further into it you go, you find all these categories just kind of break down. That the reality of individuals, like what a straight man is, and what a straight man. Yes, he's a straight man, but he fancies X, Y, and Z actually. And if push comes to shove, he's not so straight, or he's got. And you get all this kind of. There's all this complexity about, you know, who you can fancy and how you feel. And I think I do look forward, and it's certainly happened more over the last 30 years, where all those categories that need to actually pin yourself and define yourself will break down. Now, I know there's a lot of defining going on now. There's a lot, there's a kind of obsession inside the trans community to define yourself exactly. But hopefully that will just break down, and people say, you know, just I'm just me. I'm just me, and I tell you what, if I fancy you, I'll let you know. Otherwise, mind your own business. You know, and if I ask you if I ask you for a bit and you don't fancy me, well, just let me know and I'll go somewhere else. You know, but I'm not going to walk around with a bloody label on my head. And I think there's a need actually for people just to be themselves. And ultimately, liberation. I used to say back in the day that people said that liberation was having loads and loads of gay pubs. No, liberation is not needing gay pubs. Mm. Liberation is when there's not, when the last gay pub shuts, we'll know we've made it. When I can go to any pub and chat somebody up, and if they're not interested, they say, no, thanks, mate. All right, thanks very much. And they're all right, fair enough. That's it. You know, you want a drink, mate? No, thanks, I'm straight. Okay, ta-da. or, oh, are you really? Yeah, but never mind, we'll talk about football instead, whatever, you know. That's what it should be. But of course, we're a long way from that. But I think I think young people now, that their ability to comprehend that people can be all sorts of complex mixtures, and ultimately, first we were oppressed, then the labels really mattered because they're a way of fighting our oppression, and then eventually, when then we won't need the labels anymore. We can just be ourselves, and that's exactly what we want to be, isn't it?
Look at us all just nodding.
We're all just like,
yes,
perfect, yes.
well done, Ray.
We're all like fist bumping.
Some really lovely comments coming in as well, from a number of people. Leanne's just said that she really wants to share this conversation with some of her trans friends who need to hear this kind of support and understanding right now. And
are we recorded then? Is this recorded?
Yeah, this stays online. This stays online forever. So it goes out live and it stays online.
I thought this was a. Well, thank God I better be careful what I say. That's.
No, it does. It stays out there. We can delete it if you need to. I can edit bits out if you said anything awful. It's like.
No, I think I've been okay. Although you told me I could drink. You did.
Yeah.
You didn't say it'd be on the internet for the rest of eternity if I'm drinking beer.
This is it's the best. Honestly, last week I did the whole Starmer is Atlee in that they are both boring comment. I've said it again now. Say it again. It's true though, isn't it? That's the only similarity. But yeah, some really, really nice comments, and Mia saying we need to challenge the whole concept of fitting in, whether it's around gender or anything else for that matter. Yeah, people should be who they are. And Mark Lungley's been commenting as well. Thanks for letting me know I was muted. That really is useful. Yeah, that was bad. I have a little control where I can mute myself and everyone else can hear me as well. So we needed you for that one. So thank you. Paul Smith said, Laura, you stole my thunder about patriarchy. Patriarchy is incredibly toxic and needs to be banished to the Museum of Hell. It's it's driven racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, and now transphobia. And yeah, I think we tend to agree with that on the panel.
By the way, there are sections of the trans. I mean, we can't give the trans community like a completely clean bill of health, because there are people and sections of the trans community who obsess about gatekeeping. They obsess about policing who is or is not like a real trans, and you think, oh, for God's sake, as if why the wider society is tough enough. We need to police yourselves as to who's really trans or not. There's this desire to be I'm the respectable trans, the real one, and all the other people are just kind of trendies who aren't real trans. And you think, oh, for God's sake, get a grip, will you? Life's too short to constantly trying to prove that, I'm the only good trans in the world. There are trans YouTubers in the States who are Trump supporters, and they're trying to buy acceptance from MAGA hat wearers by pretending to be, I'm the acceptable face. Look at me. I'm really pretty. I'm really beautiful. You'd never know that I was trans, therefore I'm okay. And all the other weirdos, all these other radical lefty weirdo trans people, they're the people you should be worried about. And it's like I used to get this, by the way, at work, where, because my friends will laugh at this, because I'm relatively straight acting. All my friends now are laughing. I can hear them laughing all over the place. But most of the time, at least, I'm kind of straight acting. So I'd come out in a place at work, and people would go on about gay stuff, and I'd call. Hang on a minute, hang on, hold it. What are you talking about? Oh no, not you. We don't mean you. We just mean those extreme, flamboyant camp queers. They're different. I mean, you're okay. You're one of us, but it's those camp ones we can't stand. And you think, no, that's not true. And I felt then I had to make it clear that no, that's not acceptable. You can't do that.
God, I'm still reeling from the fact that there's a trans collective who support Trump.
But
Dear me.
This is the thing with identity politics.
I will.
Blair White, and you will be afraid, I tell you.
But this is the thing with identity politics.
Blair with an E on the end, and White. She's monstrous.
Identity politics always plays to the right, because what they can do is they can say, and we see the Tories do it, and they'll do it at one point as well. The Tories in the UK will at one point find some beautiful trans woman who will be their like representative on trans issues, who's right wing, and then they will say they don't have a trans problem, even though they will be denying those trans people healthcare and making them like, you know, putting them in. And this is where identity politics is absolutely awful. It doesn't mean, and I think it was I think it's Carl Alexander Rosser, in any sufficiently large group of humans, you will find arseholes. This is true. Not all trans people will be nice people. It's just like not like they're just people. There will always be people who are arseholes, and that is the opposite of identity politics. However, if they are being treated badly because of who they are, whether that's their race, their gender identity, their sexuality, anything like that, then that is when it becomes a real problem, and that's when it becomes discrimination. But that doesn't mean that those people can't be arseholes. They will be arseholes. You know, that's and he's really hit the nail on the head there, I think.
Have you ever seen Candace Owen?
Yes.
Candace, C-A-N.
We started on that woman.
Candace Owen. She's a black American Trump supporter. And there's also a woman called Ariel Scarcella, who's like a transphobic lesbian Trump supporter as well. That there are people out there, and you think, well, look, they're probably working through their own issues, and I almost feel like I should be gentle with them, because you know they're working through their own issues, particularly. But you know, hey, they're desperate for acceptance.
Candace Owen, though, she suffered really badly with anorexia when she was younger, because she didn't get any help and got through it herself, somewhat successfully. I guess that was under interpretation, but she, I was seeing an interview with her recently, and she very much plays the role of the person who, I did it myself, so that means that everybody can do it. If you're anorexic, why are you taking money from the state to get help? You can do it yourself. And clearly I'm a black woman and I've made something of myself, so anyone who's whinging because they're black, it's their own fault. They should just get out and make it work. I did, so you can. And it's just like, and so she denies the fact. I think she made her own way before she married somebody.
No, I'm not saying she got there because of that, but I was just asking.
I think she is married. Yeah, I think so.
It's like when you knock on the door of these people. You knock on the door of these kind of people they've got working class accents, but they've obviously made it in business to some degree. They're small businessmen. They're like, you know, got their own business. They employ like half a dozen people. And you often get it to the BBC. The BBC will do like a vox pop. They'll go through some sort of northern town and they'll talk to somebody who's got a working class accent. So knowing that their viewers will think they're working class people, but they're not working class people at all. You know, they're businessmen. But they were born into the working class. And you said, that's like you said, oh, I made it. So why can't all these lazy bastards, you know? And I canvassed them in Chingford. There's lots of them in Chingford, which is a marginal seat, which we just failed to win last time. Although we had a swing to Labour in that seat, I should point out, but we still failed to win it. And you know, and you say, well, okay, yeah, but you did do this, but you didn't do it on your own. You had like all these benefits from the 70s, all that stuff that the kids these days don't get. You could buy your own house. You could survive. You could succeed in a way that your kids won't be able to. And it's very interesting. Sometimes you get some old Tory, some semi-detached Tory voter with a SUV in the front garden. You know, when your heart sinks when you have to canvass them. You know the ones I mean. and they're giving it all this about, you know, that Corbyn, I'll never vote for Labour while that Corbyn's there. And of course they haven't voted Labour for 40 years. Truthfully, they haven't voted for Labour since Harold Wilson. But then you often find their teenage kid walks down the corridor. And they're like really strong Labour, you know, because I'll never get what my dad's got. I'll never be able to afford my own house. I'll never be able to survive. I'm sad. I'm 23 years old and I've got more debts than my dad ever had in his life. You know, that's the point.
That's
I was
one of the
doing
fun
this-
things about canvassing. I'll just be really brief here, Rochelle. When you go to someone's door and you know how that person's voted in the past, and they go, "I've been Labour all my life. I've never wanted to vote anyone else." And then you look and it says, "Funny that, because it says you voted Lib Dem in 2013."
Yeah.
You know, you
Exactly.
told us that you hated us and you didn't want to. It's funny. We do. Sorry, Rochelle.
All right, I'm a Durham County Council candidate, right, Ray? So we do food banks, we do call banks. So I was on one of the phone banks today, and it was the first time I've ever done it, first time I've ever used anything like that, like ringing out, and we had like when you're talking about like what they voted for previously, literally on the screen it was like past voting. I can't remember the terminology, but it was literally like Conservative, and I was like, oh no. There's no way of skipping that person and moving on to the next one. I was like, and it was like my third ever call out that I've ever done, canvassing, and I was like, it's gonna be fine. And she was really nice. She was really polite. She was like, no, I hate Labour, but I vote Conservative and I hate Labour. And I was like, okay, great, you're really polite about it. Thank you, bye.
Fair enough, isn't it?
I always like canvassing the Tory houses.
I couldn't
I
believe it.
always think I can win, but I'm an eternal optimist, so I always think I can win everyone back. I waste like 40 minutes on the door.
I know, you're terrible. I always run the board and wait for you for like half an hour. I'm like, you gonna shut up.
It's when they chase you up the front path you want to start worrying. That's the trouble.
Oh my God, that happens as well with your leaflet to throw back at you.
Yeah.
No.
It's really bad when they do that. Yeah, enjoy that, Michelle.
We got it a lot because of the ridiculous spin around Corbyn last time. We got like some people. Actually, it was really we were canvassing with someone who's ex-armed forces, really lovely fella called Gary, and he was canvassing on the doors with us, and he posted a leaflet through the door when someone didn't answer, and they came out and threw it in his face. He says, "How dare you do this to our armed forces?" We're like, you've just attacked a veteran. You've just thrown this in a veteran's face. You know, he didn't like literally throw it in his face, but he threw it at him.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, you know, there's a veteran there. You don't really care about veterans, do you? You don't care about them being homeless on the street. You don't care about that kind of stuff. You care about maybe what's in the media, because eventually he apologised to the guy, but like someone who had served, if they cared that much about it, they should have been immediately like, whoa, I'm sorry. But it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was really handy to have out on the doors as well, especially in the Corbyn era, because he was actually a veteran who served in Northern Ireland. So when we got the whole, well, he's an IRA sympathiser or a terrorist, blah, 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 this guy would just go and have a chat with him and they'd be like, oh, okay. He was brilliant. I wonder if he's going to be out this time around. But we don't have Corbyn anymore. I don't think we'll have that argument at all.
No, I mean, are we allowed to swear on this channel? I'm not sure we are.
Yeah.
Holy shit, yes, we are.
Because I was counting. It was in East End of London. It was a marginal seat which we just narrowly won. It was Dagenham and Rainham. We won by 200 votes, which thank God that's one that we held on to. And but I was canvassing, and this guy, his first thing as I knocked on his door, he opened the door, and you can always tell he's in his vest. Do you know what I mean? If he's in his singlet, you know you're onto a loser, really. And he was like, that Tony Blair is a wanker. And I said, yes, I agree with you entirely. Corbyn is a Marxist wanker. And I said, well, actually, I wish he was, but he's not, actually. And then he's like, you're all fucking wankers. And I said, so I just thought, okay, sir, shall I just put you down as against then?
Undecided.
Undecided. We'll call again if you made your mind up. And he and obviously my politeness incensed him, and he just leant out of his bedroom window upstairs. It was a house, and he just screamed "Wanger, Wanger" at all of us. It was like he kept it up for the entire until we finished the street. He was like, screaming this "Wanker" out of it. Oh God, okay, fair enough.
Wow,
do you ever think about these people?
Opinion, right?
Was it 2014 that Pride came out? Do you ever think that these people might have watched Pride and shed a tear and thought, oh, I love these guys. And then it's like, when they actually turn up at your door, they're like, wanker!
I doubt it. I doubt anybody who's going to shout wanker at Labour canvassers is going to enjoy Pride, really. I can't imagine.
I don't know. It was heartwarming.
I do confess, though, and it's not rational. I'm going to be clear, as I'm on live telly sort of thing. I want to be clear. This is not a rational or a reasonable thought to have, and I feel guilty for having it. But when I canvass people who I obviously clock as being gay, like a couple, and don't ask me how I know, but sometimes I just know. And they're Tories, and I feel like a particular kind of loathing come over me. I just think I've got a particular kind of loathing for gay Tories. I've got no right for that, and it's an outrageous thing for me to think they've got an entire right to be what they want. But a little bit of me just wants to slap them. I really kind of just want to slap them. But
I have similar feelings about working class Tories. I'm like, are you daft?
Yeah.
Really? Especially up here where like our whole communities are based around mining villages. How can you like the Tories? What's the matter with you? Yeah. You don't have to love Labour, but you can't love the Tories.
Yeah, you can't love them. Doesn't work.
I'd find it hard to talk about people who lived through the strike who are now Tories. I'm not sure what I'd say to them. I don't know how that conversation would go.
It'd probably just be us stood there with just
ultimately,
open jaws.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's not their fault. They were led for decades to believe that Labour could do nothing for them, and then as a mixture under Corbyn, a mixture of the abuse he suffered from the media, and the fact that they made the mistake, I think, of looking like they're promising the world. In the last election, they were pulling out promises out of a hat like rabbits, and it became unbelievable. And I think a lot of people just didn't believe. A lot of people who are working class Tories, they're working class Tories because they just think we're full of shit, that we won't ever achieve what we're promising. So they'd rather vote for real Tories than people who are going to pretend to be good and then let them down.
Yeah, that's
what
a fair
it comes
point.
down to.
I think I've just pinpointed where my socialism comes from with that, Ray. You've just enlightened me. I had a teacher in primary school who wrote, when they're writing your book before you leave, and one of my teachers wrote, reach for the stars, even if you only hit the lamppost. And if people could have thought that in the last election, we wouldn't be here now. We'd be all right. Like, is this Tory government working for you? No. So give someone else a chance, even if they're promising something that doesn't seem possible. It's got to be better than this. And I remember doing it was one of the shows, one of the left-wing shows, might have been Labour Grassroots or something we were on, and John McDonnell was on, and we were talking about the handling of coronavirus and stuff, and somebody said to him, how different would it have been if Jeremy Corbyn was in charge from 2017? Oh, his little face, he looked like he wanted to cry. And then I was like, oh my God. Honestly, I do think it would have been, we'd have had I don't even know how long ago it was now, like 5-6 years of investing in the NHS and getting us ready for this. We wouldn't still be in lockdown a year later. We wouldn't be up in the hundreds of thousands of deaths. I really firmly believe that. But you can't seem to tell anyone now because so many people are just going, well, he's trying his best.
Oh, I know, I can't stand that.
Well, I can't deal with it.
Like he's a kid who came last in his primary school sprint race.
Yeah.
But he tried his
lost
best.
his shoe on the way down. Like he lost his shoe, fell over, and he tried. What?
Yeah, like
His butler was chasing him with a thing that was distracting him.
Yeah, it's like me in woodwork. When I make something in woodwork, take it home to my dad, who was very handy with his hands. He was like a manual worker, and he was really good at that sort of stuff. And I was terrible at woodwork and things like that. It's all to do with the testosterone, I think, whatever. And so I was terrible at woodwork, and I'd bring home these things, and I was pleased as punch. And my dad would say, "That's lovely, son. What is it? What is it though? What actually is?" And he did his best. I think my PE teacher said, well, he's not a natural athlete, but he always tries his best. I think, oh well, thank you very much. Basically, it meant I spent. If I was playing cricket, I was on the outfield, like chewing grass. And if I was playing football, I stood by the goalie, chatting to the goalie. He was just as sportingly inept as I was, really, hoping the ball would not come anywhere near us.
Despite a lifelong ambition to be Prime Minister, he's not a natural Prime Minister, but he tries his best.
Yeah,
well, he doesn't really, does he, Boris Johnson? But unless you think his best is terrible.
No. When we were calling out today, one of the questions we were asking was like, on a scale of 1 to 9, 1 being poor, 9 being really good, The first question was, how well do you think this government have handled the coronavirus crisis? And this, like, one of the ladies that I spoke to today was like 9. They've done really well. And then I literally had to physically bite my tongue in my mouth. I've never had to do that ever. Like, I literally was like, just down the phone. Like, are you kidding? I really, how? So many questions. Like, how? Where does that even come from? How do we live in the same place? And you think that is true?
Well, the thing is, Rochelle, it's not that he's done how well he's done. It's just that nobody's suggesting they could do better.
Yeah, there was that.
Outside Piers Morgan, no one's holding him to account.
And how weird that Piers Morgan is holding him to account. What's happened there?
I feel dirty whenever I say it, really. I don't like it. He's got his own reasons for doing it. He's not doing it for, I don't know why he's doing it, but he's not doing it for good reasons. He'll have his own agenda.
See, this scares me more, though, when you've got right-wing media moguls back in Labour. Why? Are they getting the money from the same people?
Well, yeah, but I don't think Piers Morgan's back in Labour. I think he's just opposing the government. And of course, you've got a situation where the Labour opposition, in a situation where the government's literally killing people in large numbers, the Labour opposition is still behind. And you think, how does that work again, really? How does that work?
Yeah. You've got to open your mouth and say something to be in opposition.
If the opposition's not opposing, then how is that woman supposed to give anything other than a 9? Because she thinks, oh, well, it's bound to be this way because there's no option. There's no alternative to it. And people like that, they don't research the situation in other European countries or how well it's been dealt with in New Zealand. They just don't care about that. They just think, oh, well, the country's doing its best. We'll all pull together. I think what will happen is that people it will take a while. People will ponder on this year and it will all come out in anger in a couple of years' time, actually. At the moment, people are just kind of, let's just get past it,
Do you think it has anything to do with like the way that the media are portraying it, though? Like with all of it, well, with all of the media at the minute.
See, I think it's mixed. I think there's a mixed problem going on here, and I'll use an example that just happened this week. So we've got a Tory MP here in Sedgefield, and he's called Paul Howell. And the other day, to his credit, he turned up to a meeting with the TUC, who were campaigning for a fair wage for key workers, for a wage uplift for all key workers. Great, back that entirely, and I was there in the background. But what he said was he totally respected key workers. He thinks they're absolutely great. His dad was a fireman. He did all these different things. And then when challenged on it, they said, well, will you write to the Chancellor and say they deserve a pay rise? And he says, well, I don't see what good that would do. Because if they get a pay rise, then, what if shop workers don't get a pay rise? And you don't understand, because if they get a pay rise, there's more money in the economy, and then shop workers would have to get a pay rise. Or you could say, you could have a greater minimum wage. So anyway, to cut a long story short, he said that he didn't want to give key workers a pay rise, even though he really supported them. So I put this on my Facebook page, and there was someone who I would consider now a working class Tory, said, well, you're always having a snipe at the Tory. What did Phil Wilson ever do for us? Now, that is the way people feel around here, because that they feel let down by the Labour Party. And this has never gone out publicly before, but quite a few of my friends know this story. When I went out and canvassed with Phil Wilson in 2017, his team were, the person running the board, was noting down every household that said they didn't like Corbyn. And on that day, there were 3 people who said they didn't like Corbyn. What wasn't noted was there were 5 people who said they didn't like Phil Wilson and 7 people who said they didn't like Tony Blair. This is a legacy issue. This is a long-running thing.
Oh yeah.
And there's a big problem. There's a big problem with the Labour Party and the perception, and I don't think the right wing of the Labour Party burying their heads is going to make that go away. You're not going to win back the red wall, which doesn't exist, by the way. The red wall isn't a thing. It isn't a place. But you're not going to win back these seats that you've lost by just assuming going back to Blairism will work.
I mean, in Bolsover, which Dennis Skinner's seat was lost. I mean, Dennis used to get like 75, 80% back in the 70s when he took the seat in 1970, which is extraordinary. I was 11 years old when Dennis Skinner entered Parliament. But by 2015, his vote had fallen to 50%. So the real collapse in Dennis's vote was through Blairism and New Labour. Corbyn in 2017, there was a very slight, I have to say, a slight uptick, but then it obviously collapsed again through the Brexit fiasco. But most of the damage was done through those years. And it's not just the governments. It's like, frankly, years and years of complacent establishment local councils that are seen, they're not seen as representing, they're seen as kind of local worthies, they're seen as Jobsworths, they're seen as they present themselves as local important people. I don't know, they haven't got that sense of, you know what I mean? I can't find the word for it really, but there's a whole series of rotten councils and rotten councillors all over the north. Only the north, because that's where the safe seats are. You get in safe Labour areas, you tend to get a concentration of complacent and lazy representatives. You know, that's why it was so easy for the SNP to destroy Labour in Scotland, because Labour had ruled Scotland, the central belt of Scotland, all that time, and people thought, well, we got nothing out of this, so let's try something new.
This is the problem you've got as well, because I know a lot of councillors, and most of them, I would say now, we're about to have a county council campaign, and most of them are dedicated and really care about this. And people who supported Tony Blair as well, by the way, there are some really, really good local councillors who I would vote for as my local councillor if I lived in that area, without a doubt, because they're just community people. There's some people who are apolitical. And there are some people who are kind of slightly Labour, generally Labour, but don't really get involved in the national side of it, just see the local thing, and that's great. You know, I can't help but see the big picture, and that's where I always go. But actually, sometimes I really admire people who just see their local situation and think, what can I do? But then you've also got you've also got some people who are like, well, I want to be a councillor. How do I do that? I'll join the Labour Party, and we do suffer from that, and we do suffer from people not being committed to the Labour Party, not knowing anything about the Labour Party. But then sometimes I think, do I not know anything about the Labour Party? Because I look into the history of it and I think, yeah, it's not as left-wing as I had allowed myself to imagine.
There are certain type of people that wherever they lived, they want to be a councillor. So wherever they live, they join the party that was in control of the council. But if they lived in Surrey, they'd be Tory councillors. If they lived in Durham, they'd be Labour councillors. You know what I mean? And also there are people. I mean, I've got a local councillor in my ward. I mean, he's not a Corbynista. He's an extremely nice bloke, and I like him enormously. But he's never voted for Corbyn. He's not a supporter of Corbyn, and he's not even particularly left in Labour Party terms. But as you said, he's a marvellous councillor, and he's been doing it for 40 years. And he knows every paving stone. He knows every door he knocks on. He knows them and their parents and their kids. You know, he said, "Oh yes, I know you. I know your grandmother, and and how's your grandma's new home adaptations going and stuff." And he knows everybody. You know, and he's generally well regarded, and he's been elected for 40 years. And we get about between 70 and 77% of the poll in my ward. So I live in one of the safest Labour wards, in one of the safest Labour boroughs in the country. Even in London, can you believe it? Yeah, you Geordie people. There are proper working class communities and Labour strongholds in London. Who knew?
I'm never one of those people who belittle the working class of London.
Oh, it gets on my wick. That writing off of working class Londoners really gets on my wick, I have to confess. But there we are. So he's a good guy. I'd vote for him. I'd vote for him easily, you know. Yeah. But he doesn't involve himself in factional stuff. He didn't vote for Corbyn, but he was never anti-Corbyn. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But there are others, shall we say, who are clearly anti-Corbyn, and they were plotting against him from the beginning, and they're different kind of people. But
did we tell you about recall motion that we got through at Sedgefield the other day? I don't know. We didn't.
The recall conference.
Yeah, we've put a recall motion through for a recall conference. Laura's just gone off, and that's not me. She's obviously using.
No, I
my
noticed
name
he's been using your name for the whole thing. By the way, I don't know if people are confusing.
I see what the viewers see, so yeah. So I didn't really realise that she was using my name, but fair enough. She can use my name if she likes. She can use any name she wants. But yeah, we put a recall motion through, and there was some sort of funny shenanigans around people trying to get the vote cancelled through a technicality and things like that. But it was really interesting because we are Sedgefield. We have people who are left wing. We have people who are right wing. We have people who would be unequivocal in their support for Tony Blair, and we voted 87% in favour. And I think the next highest was abstention for recall conference motion because they're so frustrated at the undemocratic things going on in the Labour Party. So it does a cut across factional lines, like a lot of things do in Sedgefield. It's an interesting area because most of it's just about getting democracy back because of how the Labour Party has been perceived locally to be undemocratic.
Yeah, my local CLP is it's always been left. Even before Corbyn, long before Corbyn, it was a traditional left CLP. But there are people in it who are not Corbynistas at all, but are horrified by the way the party is going in terms of its internal structures and what's happened. Horrified, and they could be won over on that issue. They're angry. They're genuinely angry because they don't agree with my politics, but they don't hate me. They recognise the job I do and how valuable and how they know that I'm loyally canvassing for Wes Streeting. I canvass for anybody in a marginal seat who needs to be canvassed for.
I still feel a little bit dirty after that, though.
I did recommend a bath in Dettol whenever I finished. I came home and gave myself a Dettol scrub down. But nevertheless, I mean, it was in 2017, we thought that seat was marginal. But of course, thanks to Jeremy, he got a 9,000 majority. But I'd canvass for anybody where it was a marginal seat. I wouldn't care in the election how right wing they were. And so the idea is that there are people who recognise that I am a hardworking party member, and they'd resent if I were suspended or expelled, they would deeply resent that, regardless of whether they agree with my politics or not. And I'm somewhat to the left. I think you'll probably have intuited from my interview. Even inside the Labour left, I'm probably on the left side of the left in Labour left. But I'm a hard worker for the party.
That's important as well, and that's important for people on the right as well. And you've acknowledged people do that. Mark Lungley has said the issue we have is there are a lot of career politicians. We need to get true working class people into elected office, but there are so many who should stand but don't because of one thing or another. There is one who won't stand for Labour as a prospective parliamentary candidate as they don't have a degree, and you just think, well, it shouldn't be a prerequisite to have a degree.
No, nonsense, isn't it?
And I remember actually thinking about this before because I got a Desmond degree, and I was thinking if I ever what attacks would they level at me, for having would it be you got a Desmond, would that be
you have to explain that to people.
A Desmond Tutu.
Yeah.
As
an act of solidarity, I got a 2-2 as well.
Yeah, well, back in the days when you used to get 2-2s.
Given my mental breakdown in my second year and the amount of alcohol I consumed, the 2-2 I was actually very relieved to get, to be honest.
I worked through it. I was very nearly a 2-1, but it was in the days where 25% of people got a 2-1 or above. Now it's 75% of people get 2-1 or above. But
my second year of uni was a kind of that's when all of my issues just kind of imploded, and I did nothing for a year. I lost it completely in my second year. So I only ended up with a 2-2. But there we are.
It's a solid working class thing to do. Go and get a Desmond.
Yeah, not wrong with a 2-2.
But the thing is, you don't need a degree anyway. That's the point.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
When I went to uni, in my first year, we used to go to the student union, and I used to smoke back then. So we literally used to sit in uni and smoke and drink in the student union bar and not go to lectures. I shouldn't really say that. No, none of my students, I didn't say that. But then obviously the smoking ban came in, so you weren't allowed to smoke in the student union bar anywhere. Like you couldn't do it. You weren't allowed to smoke on ground. You had to literally leave the grounds and go off site and do all of this. And then everybody in my year group, all their marks rose because we weren't spending that much time in the uni, like at the uni bars.
Oh my God, you're so young. I think I could smoke all the time in my union bar, and it was opposite my classroom. And they used to give me 4-hour gaps between the lecture and then the seminar following it. And I was like, well, that's dangerous. I'm clearly never getting to that.
Yeah, I'm never going to get a part 2. Like.
See, you've inspired Cal to get a Rolly. Apparently, I hope I pronounced it right. If not, it's my accent. You did tell me how to pronounce it earlier on. Yeah, Laura, I think they brought in the smoking ban while you were at uni.
Really?
I think so.
I graduated in 2010, I think.
I see. I graduated in 2006. And I went to uni late.
The sad thing is, even if we got, I'd like to see a House of Commons made up of people who worked in Tesco's or Starbucks or Amazon or Sports Direct. That's what you need. And we used to have that, by the way. We actually used to have much more, but never completely, but much more of that. The Labour benches. I saw a play. It was set in the kind of late 70s. It was a play, and it was clear from a lot of the rank and file Labour MPs, backbench Labour MPs in the 70s were from clear working class backgrounds. I have to say, though, sadly, being working class does not stop you from being a right-wing shite.
Yeah.
There are plenty of impeccable working class MPs whose politics are despicable. And you can get a situation where you go there as a working class MP and you're intimidated by it. They make you. It's to do with the around McDonald Day. All these working men were elected, and instead of having contempt for the place, which is what you should just have contempt for its frippery. They were in awe of it. They were so grateful to be allowed into this kind of holy and holies, and they were amazed to be accepted as equals by these people who were their betters, so to speak. But they deferred to all this, and so you get a lot of working class Labour MPs. You go to Parliament and just kind of, they just buy into the system completely. They see it. There was a very famous leading Labour Party MP who goes on and on about their poverty-stricken teenage years, but then talk about how well they have done to subsequently. And now look at me, I'm a Labour MP, and I've reached the dizzy heights of the shadow cabinet. And you think, yeah, being a Labour MP isn't a personal achievement. You're supposed to be there for other people. You're supposed to be there to fight for everyone else.
It's so funny you say that, because I heard a Labour MP today tell me the same story I have heard about 8 times. Like, you probably don't know this, but this was my childhood, and I'm like, yeah, I do know this.
Yeah,
but look what I have achieved.
Yeah,
all right.
It's good to have Labour MPs who are working class, but you find those Labour MPs who are from working class backgrounds, it's either obvious from their accent or it's unstated. Those who go on and on and on and on about their deprived childhood, you think, yeah, you're making a political point out of this. You're using this to hide something else. And even when a particular Labour MP, even when I supported them, I was still kind of uneasy about how often this issue was raised. And as it turned out, my suspicions were correct. So, mentioning no names.
I think we might be talking about the same person, but I will mention.
I will be. It's invidious to mention any names, but I'm sick to death of people trading on their poverty-stricken youth, and now they've got the opportunity to shaft the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
There's been a couple of funny comments, by the way.
Can I just shout out to Tom Greenwood? Can I just shout out to Tom Greenwood, who's my mate from my own Labour Party, and I'm glad he's watching. All right, mate.
Hello, Tom.
Hey, Tom. Really good to meet you.
Diamond.
Become a member of Socialist think tank. It's free.
The awkwardness.
He's saying hiya.
And he's in the Labour Party. He's under 35, so he's gold dust.
Well, that's it. You know, it's youth. Did I,
No.
It's funny with regards to socialists and youth things, when it, like, isn't it under 27 you're a young member of Young Labour?
Yeah.
Yeah, under 27. I had an under 30 thing for my trade union. If you're under 30, you're a young member. It's quite funny. I always thought when I was a young member of the year at 29 or something like that, some sort of...
It's changed a lot. Sorry, look, Rochelle, you go.
No, it's all right. No, you go.
In the 80s, when I was active, I mean, LGSM, anybody over 30 was considered to be an elder statesman, like an older. LGSM, 90% of us, I would say, were under 30. Very many of us were between 20 and 25, 26. I was 25. Mark was a year younger than me. And it's like, yeah, it's extraordinary how young we were. And I think any political meeting I went to in the 80s, you'd be lucky to find 10% of the meeting over 35. Now you go to a meeting on the left, and that's the far left and the Labour Party left. You know, thank God it's slowly changing, but there's a real shortage of people under 40, let alone under 30. You know, there's a gap, and I think there's a gap between the kind of the Obi-Wan Kenobis and the little Padwans, and there's no one in between. You know, there needs to be a kind of I think we lost a lot in the Blair years, and now there's the new generation, like people like Tom and people that I just love that new generation coming through, who are fired up with kind of enthusiasm to like learn the lessons of the Corbyn years, and it's like, yeah, we'll get them next time. It's good.
We went to early Momentum meetings, didn't we, Laura? And it was before it was called Momentum. It was Jeremy Corbyn for leader, and before that mailing list became Momentum, and I'm not really a huge fan of where it went after that. But we did, and we would have these like young speakers. So we had Harry Cross, who was the chair, who was young but absolutely fantastic, and I've interviewed him, and he did a brilliant thing on economics, one of my earliest interviews, and explained it so well. And then Charlotte Austin, I remember her coming, and I was a teacher, and she was a sixth form student, and she was there, and I just thought this was brilliant, that someone who could have been in my lesson earlier on, you know, because I was teaching at a school that had a sixth form, was basically an authority figure, if you like. You know, I don't like to think of chairs and secretaries and stuff as authority figures, because it's a facilitating thing, but her to be given the opportunity to do that, and she's absolutely outstanding. She's in the Durham Miners Gala film as well. I know that we, both Ray and Laura both in that film as well, and she's such a good character. But those are the type of people now that are being driven away from the party. You know, and they've been driven away from the Labour Party because actually it's back to business as usual. We'll all become over 50s, you know. And do you know what it's going to end up being like? Once they get rid of the left wing, it'll end up being like fistfights between the Blairites and Brownites, like it used to be before the left wing got control of the party as well, because that used to happen. Factional battles in the Labour Party aren't restricted to just the left. Blairites and Brownites fistfights in Newcastle. Just like Google it. It happened.
I think if in the initial, given this what we're going through now, it's inevitable that many people are going to leave the party. The thing is, I'm not despondent about that. You hang on to whether you're in or out of the party. There's a layer of radicalized younger people, and even a re-radicalized older people. And some are in the party, some will have left, and some won't. But I think the important thing is to keep in contact with all of them and to build a movement. A movement ready for, because the world, as I said in my own interview, you know, the world, something's going to go bang soon, and we need to be around. We need to be ready for it when it goes bang. People are just, they're just kind of mulling it all over just now, and they'll get angry, and something will snap, and we need to, and people outside the party, people inside the party, there'll be one movement, and we need to just kind of go for it. I think people should stay, and I'd encourage people to stay. But if somebody leaves, I'm not going to cast them to outer darkness because they've left. You know, Joe Solo is like a diamond. I don't think he should have left the Labour Party, but I don't care that he has, and he's still a diamond, and I'll work with him on anything.
I'd had. It's weird that you talk about all these things. So I had this experience, right? So basically, I was a member of the Labour Party for a long, long, long time. Since I was young, I used to work in a pub where our local MP used to drink, and loads of people that I knew used to drink in there. And it was literally pubs and politics from like a really young age, and that's where all of my knowledge came from. And then when I'd left and gone to uni and then came back, and then I'd had like a break, like what Ray was talking about type. I'd had like a break from politics. I'd had my kids and I was teaching, and then like pandemic, and then we had the Corbyn, and I nearly joined again, and then I wasn't, and then and then the thing that really got me, what you're talking about there, is like that thing that makes you want to, like, a call to arms, like your action, like you want to go and do something. And it was for me, it was the PPE thing. I've talked about it loads, but it got on me absolute nerves. And I thought, you know what? They don't care about us. We need to do something. I've got kids in school who have aunties and uncles who go to work and that haven't got any PPE, blah, blah, blah. And I'd facilitated this thing at school and made loads of PPE, and all the kids helped, and it was really good. And then it was like, out of that, someone had said, like, have you not thought about being like a counsellor? And I was like, oh no, like, God, they get loads of stick. Like they'll get loads of stick. They'll be hell on. I've got 2 young kids. I don't want to like bring them into a type of thing. Anyway, the more I thought about it, I thought, I've been able to do this, so I might be able to do something later on. Anyway, joined. I'm now a candidate. Blah blah blah. And one of the first things I posted on this candidates page is I'd helped with this project in SAME. So all I'd done was I went to one meeting, listened to what they wanted, and then I produced some like visualizations of what it could look like at the end. And then like, yesterday on an opposition page, someone had commented and said like, oh, Young Labour taking credit for what they haven't done. And then like I would never retaliate and say like, oh, actually, yes, I did, because I'd love to, but I haven't got time. Like ultimately, I'd rather be doing something else. But I just thought like, what a load of crap. Like I did do them. I did do those things. And the fact that somebody is already trying to disrupt the fact that I did, like, is hilarious. This is exactly what I wanted to avoid, standing as a counsellor or anything like that. But now that it's actually happened, I just think like, what a load of shit. Like, isn't it though? Really, isn't it a load of shit? All this propaganda, people are going to talk about you, people are going to say anything you want. Like, I think the whole thing needs to change. Like, they shouldn't be allowed to just talk shite about and, you know, do things that they want to do, or I don't know. I'm trying not to rant and
we should say this more. We should call it out more. People who don't do anything, having a go at people who do things is really frustrating. Some like Labour people don't do anything, but you do.
They made it spin as if like she came to one meeting, and I was like, yeah, I did. I was also 9 months pregnant that you haven't actually told the world about, because if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. I was 9 months pregnant. I only had to come to one meeting because, funnily enough, I had a little list and I wrote down what you wanted, and then I went away and I did it. Mm-hmm. What I don't expect to then happen is just because I've, as a person, said, oh, I've done this. But just because we come from polar opposite ends of the political spectrum, you can then turn around and say, well, no, you didn't. Because I still did. And it's that thing of like, needs to change, totally needs to change.
The whole culture does though. Like that is a perfect example of why people don't get involved, because it's like, oh, hang on, you've got to have your brownie points, and you've got to have been to like 50 meetings, and you've got to have been out and canvassed and knocked on doors. And no, I can come to one meeting and make a difference. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that, but there is a whole, and it's in the Labour Party massively, that, well, I've never seen you at a meeting before. Well, that's because I've got 10 small children and 50 dogs at home and I can't get to a meeting, and now that the pandemic's happened I can zoom in. So it's pathetic, it really is. And I'll have to go on record and say, I know a lot of people who are really hard workers. I am yet to meet anybody like Rochelle, who you will literally go, this might be an idea, and then literally 5 minutes later it's done, and Michelle's like, here you go. So I can well believe that you went to one meeting and went away and did it all for them. And you know what, if it's sort of right wingers or Tories or what have you, sort of having a go at you, you're doing something right. If you're pissing them off, you're pissing the right people off.
Aye. That's what Rob said. Rob was like, "Don't show me any more, Rochelle." Kind of cope. I says, "Okay." He just wants to go out there and talk to everybody.
My first meeting, when I stood as chair, they said that when my name was read out as going for chair, they went. Someone shouted, "Paul Daly, who's he?" and then and like to belittle me. And then the second meeting, they tried to get me to stand down, and that has happened at a number of meetings where they're just going, "Are you going to resign?" No, not today.
It's like every single election, just before the election, Paul gets asked to step down for one reason or another. And after the election, I get somebody says something about why I shouldn't have been elected.
Yeah.
Every single election, you can guarantee it. Like, I'm secretary now for Sedgefield, but I shouldn't be because I'm Paul's wife and there's too much power in one household.
They'll be accusing you of wearing the trousers at home now.
Yeah. Hey, that's all right. I'll just do what I'm told. That's always good. Leanne Powell said the subtitle said Paul Daly. That's okay. I'll accept that. Yeah, they were trying to get me to stand down for a number of reasons. Remember, I think my favourite one was when they tried to get me to stand down to just give someone else a chance.
Aww.
Because you're such a terrible person, but you're also popular. So I have no chance of winning this election.
No, the argument was for democracy, you should stand down.
For the sake of democracy, because I've had the role for too long and because too many people are voting for me, I should stand down for the sake of democracy.
Yeah, it's like the right were never they never held on to positions for like 30 years until new members of the parties full up. That never happened. No. Right.
So I think we are coming to a close here because we've been on for 2 hours. This is a good length of stream. This we've done all right. Yes. It's flown by because we're nice people, and we normally have a couple of minutes chat after this as well, where we probably name names and all sorts of things. Thank you so much for everyone who commented tonight. If you want to get in a last minute question, please do. If there's any last minute question. I'm just going to come round the panel. I'm going to come to Ray last as the special guest. I'm not going to make any closing comments personally. But anyone want to make any closing comments? Laura?
What, on everything we've talked about tonight? There's so much.
On anything? Just any sort of closing comments. Do you want to tell people? Whatever you want to do. It's all free for all tonight.
Don't be a dick.
It's a good point, that. Well made.
Mine will be, don't just draw dicks.
But if you do, draw them detailed.
Anatomically.
Yeah, just to convince people you've actually got one.
Because we
drawing from life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ray, anything you'd like to finish off on? It's been a really good discussion, and I do think that the important thing about everything you've said is the title of this was Solidarity.
Well, I was going to hit that theme, yeah.
Yeah, and we're doing that, and you've shown that I think the main bulk of the conversation was on the trans community and solidarity with trans people. So thank you.
Clearly, my local Labour Party does work with trade union struggles. It's not like I'm a full-time trans activist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not even a full-time gay activist anymore because there's no need to be, really. I said I'm the chair of my Labour Party. I'm just the chair of my Labour Party. I'm not the gay chair of the Labour Party. I'm just the chair. My sexuality now, as it should be, is irrelevant. And that hopefully, I look forward to the day when we don't have to discuss trans rights at all, I said, there's a great trans YouTuber who once said, she's really looking forward to being for trans people no longer to be oppressed because there's so many really funny things about being trans that the transphobes they never get. They always make stupid, samey nonsense jokes. But there's some actually trans people can be really funny, but you can't tell the jokes because we're too because trans people are too oppressed for people to understand the jokes. But on solidarity, I think it's really good. I think it's a word often bandied around is solidarity, but We've got nothing else other than that, really, because we've got no money, we've got no press, we've got no police, we've got no army. Literally, the only thing working people have got is solidarity. And of course, our enemies know that, and they'll try anything to set one group of workers against another. And, you know, I mean, I know that, you know, women and black people and trans people and gay LGBT people, I know that many of them are not working class, but that's fine. That's their life. I'm worried about our people. I'm worried about working class people, our side. And inside our movement, we need to have unity. Now, we don't just insist on unity. We earn the right. I mean, yeah, we earn the right for LGBT people and black people and women to put their trust in us. But we build solidarity. It's no good. It's not good enough just fighting for if you're trans, it's no good just fighting for trans stuff. You've got to fight for every other trade unionist. You've got to join your union. You've got to fight against racism. You know, you've got to do all that stuff. So it's solidarity. Solidarity is all there is, because that's all we've got. That's the only weapon working people have got. And if we haven't got, so they know it and they try to split us, and we mustn't ever allow them.
I'm just going to say thank you there.
No.
Thank you so much. And everyone, bye-bye. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for all your comments.
Cheers, man. I'll keep in touch. I'm glad I ran into you people. It's fabulous. I want to continue this relationship. Yeah, cheers. Ta-da.
Always.
Keep the red flag flying.